Hi, everyone. So, as many of you know who subscribe to this channel, over the last 10 years, we've been focusing on this idea that God needs us, God needs our mitzvahs. And throughout the years, after trying to share it with people, always hitting resistance and people saying it's heresy and you can't say that, God is above all this. I was just watching an interview with Rabbi Manis Ruben's youngest brother, Avram Fried. And in the course of the interview, this little interesting tidbit, a little story with the Lubavitcher Rebbe came up. And as I was hearing it, it just hammers home this point about how every single little thing that we do is so essential. And the Rebbe himself was trying to encourage that idea with his following story. I want you to take a look, listen, and tell me what you think.
Being that your Rebbe was sort of the guide for you, what, I guess, input or involvement did the Rebbe have when it came to your music? Or did you go to the Rebbe with your music and say, I want to put this out? Or
Good question. So in 1980, I think it was 1980, when No Jew was about to be released, I notified the Rebbe coming out with an album. The title is No Jew, which I actually heard that line, I heard from the Rebbe, who said many times by Farbrengen that when Mashiach comes, kein Yid kann nicht bleiben in Golus, or wird nicht bleiben in Golus. Otherwise, it won't be a Gula Shlema. If one Yid is missing, it's an incomplete puzzle.
right?
That's how important every Yid is. And I remember saying, that's a good line for a song. No Jew will be left behind. That was my first English song. So the Rebbe answered me. One of the very few answers that I got from the Rebbe was to write on the cover not to play on Shabbos and Yom Tov. That was my first instruction from the Rebbe.
Wow, that became a staple in the industry. That
Exactly.
became...
Exactly. So looking back now, I mean, let's be honest, my audience doesn't really listen to music on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Even when they're really halishing to, I don't think they're listening to music on Shabbos.
Maybe with like their Naki radio, but beyond that, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Chalila.
So what was the point? Like, I guess the Rebbe looked a little bit ahead that one day this music will reach an audience that maybe is not so careful about Shabbos. As a matter of fact, I have a nice story about a young man, a young bacher who wrote me a letter where he writes to me, he's a big fan, he loves the music, gives him a lot of joy and chizuk, and Shabbos, he has a problem because he would very much like to play this stuff on Shabbos, but he noticed that it says on the thing, on the cover, please do not play on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So he writes to me, if someone would take a gun to my head and tell me, play Fried's music on Shabbos, I wouldn't, because I'm respecting your request not to play on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So I wrote him back, and I said, you know what, maybe the Rebbe, when he told me to print on the album not to play on Shabbos and Yom Tov, he saw you, and this is your way of keeping Shabbos.
Wow. You know what's fascinating to me about this story? That he respected you so much that you had a request.
Yes.
And out of that respect that he had for you, how could I
exactly
violate the request?
Exactly.
If people had that relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom and they had that respect, the Rebbeinu Shalom is asking us not to desecrate the Shabbos.
Good point.
If it came as a result of how he felt towards you.
Deep.
Yeah. Then there's a fellow in Eretz Yisrael who, when I met him, I think he's a mayor of a city someplace, I forget which city, and he once told me, Fried, ata gorem li onek Shabbat. What? On my treadmill, I listen to music on Shabbos. Onek Shabbos.
You didn't know that I had the free track on the Peloton,
Yeah.
It's so funny because I was looking today and someone told me this about that. And I have this, these are your nephews.
I know them.
Eighth Day.
And
And they were on this program and they gave me the CD. And I said, does it really say it? Like most artists nowadays have, please do not play on Shabbos Yom Tov. I'm looking at the CD, look in the back, right below their feet over there. And Surly will get this on the camera. It says, please do not play this album on Shabbos Yom Tov.
Still there.
It's still there. From the Rebbe's mouth.
So actually what happened was the rest of the story is that when I sent in the record to the Rebbe, he immediately sent out a note. Where does it say don't play on Shabbos and Yom Tov? And what you should do now is get a sticker. Listen how important that was to him. Get a sticker and put a sticker on every cover. So I realized it was on the cover. It was small on the back. But he also wanted on the actual record, on the actual cassette,
Wow.
on the actual CD.
Someone loses the case.
Exactly,
they
not
have-
just on the outside cover. So that was a chiddush. I didn't realize he wanted it on everything.
Wow.
How
Wow.
important it was to him.
Did you hear that? That was unbelievable. The Rebbe was so careful to make sure to tell him that it should be printed, that it should not be played on Shabbos, the Sabbath, or any festivals, because it's so infinitely important, obviously, to God. And that was the lesson or the instruction that the Rebbe gave. How is that not essential to God? Why do people fight this idea that it's not necessary and God can't be affected, and in his essence, he's above all this? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And on the contrary, to say that it's heresy to say that God needs our mitzvahs and God is affected is impossible. And we know by Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, it said, Shechina medaberes mitoch gorner, that God literally spoke through his throat. So when the Rebbe instructed Avram Fried, the singer, to say, please make sure, he didn't comment about his singing, or it was a very specific instruction about what would happen if people play this at a time that God really doesn't want it to be played. The Rebbe was so concerned with God and how that would affect him. That was the little piece of advice. So I heard this interview. I wanted to share it. I hope somebody would appreciate this insight. And, we're preparing for Shavuos. And one small little piece that I just thought of is when God gave the Torah, he said, who's going to be the guarantors? And the Jewish people said, our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God said, no. And they said, how about the prophets? And God said, no. And finally, they said, our children. Why did God need a guarantor? Obviously, because of how necessary the Torah is to God, how essential it is. And he said, I can't just give this to you without guarantors. I need a guarantor. When do you need a guarantor? When something is really, really necessary. So I hope you enjoy this clip. If you want to leave any feedback in the comments below, please do.